Now, Politico has revealed that the Justice Department warned Mueller to limit his testimony to his public findings. In other words, what's in the report. According to a former U.S. official, the Justice Department is, quote, taking the position that anything outside the written pages of the report, the Mueller report, are things about which presidential privilege hasn't been waived. Well, CBS News has also acquired a letter to Mueller dated today in which the Justice Department says any testimony must remain within the boundaries of your public report. Meanwhile, President Trump tweeted his opposition to Mueller's testimony today, again saying Mueller should not be given another bite at the apple. In the end, it will be bad for him and the phony Democrats in Congress. He also repeated his assertion that he won't watch the hearings, though he conceded that he might catch some of it.
No, I'm not going to be watching. Probably, maybe I'll see a little bit of it. I'm not going to be watching Mueller because you can't take all those bites out of the apple. He still ruled no collusion, no obstruction, and this thing should have ended a long time ago. This has been going on for 2.5 years.
Well, Trump has been trying to downplay his interest in the hearings. NBC News notes that, quote, the president's schedule for that day, that's Wednesday, only includes a routine lunch. And aides point to his morning executive time as a natural window for Trump to take in snippets of the coverage. I'll bet more than that. I'm joined right now by Democratic Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon of Pennsylvania, the vice chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and Heidi Presbla is correspondent for NBC News. Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you for joining us. What is your, I don't know, I guess this isn't fair, but what's your greatest hope for Wednesday from Mueller?
Well, we hope that the American people tune in to actually watch Bob Mueller testify. And when they do, they will see that the president's been peddling fake news. He's been saying no obstruction, no collusion. And in fact, that's not what the Mueller report says.
What about the Justice Department apparently putting public pressure now, clearly public pressure on Mueller not to go anywhere beyond his brief, what's in the written report? No word beyond it.
Well, I mean, this is what we've been seeing for months, is that the Justice Department and the administration have been trying to suppress the witnesses, redact the report, and hide the evidence. I think the president is terrified.
Well, it's not exactly like Pantangelo's brother showing up in the witness hearing during the hearings in the Rackets Committee, but they seem to be saying they've got something on Mueller. They've got some power over him. Isn't he a retired official of the Justice Department? What power do they really have?
I think they are seriously underestimating Bob Mueller, because Bob Mueller is nothing if not a patriot. And I think he's shown throughout this entire proceeding that he's going to do the right thing. He's going to do his job. He's going to perform an investigation, and he's going to bring out the truth, regardless of what the president wants.
Well, let me ask you about you and your caucus. You're Democratic. You're one of the leaders of the caucus in that committee. You know, watching these hearings like I do, most people do watch on television, you sit and there's always a pattern. The 5-minute rule creates sort of a new event every 5 minutes. A member of Congress comes on. They sort of introduce themselves. They sort of make a play for people out there to like them, I guess. And then they finally get to some questions. And they don't seem to have any coherent relationship that we just heard from the congressperson asking questions a minute or two before. Is there going to be a coherent development of questioning by each congressman following up on the other, or is it going to be the same old sort of individual show?
Well, I can't speak for the Republican caucus. I know that a few of them have said things that my impression is that they're trying to turn it into a circus. But, you know, the Democratic side of the aisle, we've been preparing for this for months. We certainly expected to see Bob Mueller immediately after he released his report, but the president's been holding it.
Will it be a coherent set of questions, one following the other, or is individual members of Congress freelance?
I expect that it will be a coherent set of questions. Although, you know, we're going to have the interruption of having Republican members question Mr. Mueller in between.
But your 2-hour prep session tomorrow that we've heard you're going to have a 2-hour prep session on the Democratic side of the committee. Will you be doing that through sort of like a chain of questioning so that one person follows up on the other when Mr. Mueller may not get to the point you want him to? Will you be following up on each other?
You know what? I haven't been briefed on what we're going to do in that session yet, but I do know that we'll be having prep sessions. But we've been having prep sessions for, you know, weeks.
Thank you so much. Well, anyway, Bob Mueller's made clear his reluctance to testify this week, and this isn't his first rodeo either. According to the New York Times, Mueller has been appeared before Congress 88 times dating back to 1990, and throughout those appearances, he showed little patience for politics. Here's one fiery exchange Mueller had with Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert of Texas after the Boston Marathon bombing in 2013.
Why did no one go to the mosque and say, who are these guys? They may attend here. Why was that not done since such a thorough job was done?
Your facts are not altogether well.
All right, point out specifically.
May I finish, Mike?
Point out specifically. Sir, if you're going to call me a liar, you need to point out specifically where any facts are wrong.
We went to the mosque prior to Boston.
Prior to Boston.
Prior to Boston happening, we were in that mosque talking to imams several months beforehand as part of our outreach efforts.
Heidi, let's talk about this thing. There's two sides to this fight. Congresswoman Scannon's one side, the Democratic side, generally speaking. The Republicans see this as an opportunity to bring down Mueller, don't they?
Of course they do. This is the only strategy that they would have going into this. And given that Nancy Pelosi has told her members to keep it even, no drama, just lay out the facts, let them speak for themselves. On the Republican side, this strategy is all about going back to the lovers that, Donald Trump talks, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, talking about the origins of the dossier. With this 5-minute rule, no matter how disciplined the Democrats are in painting this narrative and following it up, it will get mussed up by the drama on the other side of the aisle. And we all know how that works with kind of sound bites and the cameras on them. So if there's any room for drama here, it's definitely going to be on the Republican side. But I do think that based on the Democrats that I've talked to, Chris, they do have a strategy in place. And it is to establish early that when Mueller said that he could not reach a conclusion because of the OLC opinion, he was emphatic about that in his statement. That is foundational. You start with that. And I talked with Madeline Dean, who's on the committee as well, as one of the members who told me this. You start with that foundation, and then you build on top of that. You build the building blocks. Did you say no collusion in your report? Very basic. The answer to that is obviously no. Did you say no obstruction? Again, no. So these things, they can build, have the building blocks. But, of course, it will get, just because of this 5-minute rule, messed up by what's going on the other side of the aisle.
Congressman, do you think establishing the fact that Mr. Mueller didn't go ahead and actually indict the president is because he didn't believe a president can be indicted while in office would give you, as members of the Congress on the Democratic side, a chance to pursue the prosecution, basically?
Well, his report reads like a prosecutorial document. He says at the outset, I did not indict because I could not, but here are all the facts that I found. He also says, if I could have said no obstruction, I would have, but I could not say that because there's so much evidence. He goes through, he details 10 different incidents of obstruction of justice, some of which amount to criminal conduct. So, I think it's really important that we lay all that out. And, if we get to the bottom line, I think Trump's initial reaction to the Mueller investigation was the appropriate one. He said, oh, my God, this is terrible. This is the end of my presidency. And I think he was right.
How do you progress further if you're a member of the House Democratic side, similarly, who wants to see impeachment proceeded with? What's your standard coming out of the hearing on Wednesday? What do you want to think happen? What headline do you want that would give you the juice to proceed further with an impeachment?
Impeachment is essentially a political decision, and it's going to have to be the American people who reach that conclusion. I hope that after this hearing, a lot of Americans are saying, oh, my God, I had no idea that was in the report.
And you think that would be enough to stimulate a national call for impeachment?
I think it could. We certainly saw during the Watergate hearings that when the hearings started, when the evidence started being put forward, the American public wasn't there. But as they learned what was really going on in the White House, they came to that conclusion themselves.
The real opportunity here, Chris, is not necessarily on the obstruction side. I have to disagree just a little bit because we've seen the numbers on impeachment notched down to about 20% now of the public. A lot of the Democrats who I talked to privately acknowledge that those numbers are unlikely to move dramatically, that this is part of a much longer evolution. But the real opportunity here is to get out in front of the American people and make it so difficult for the Republicans to not be cooperating with them when it comes to Russian interference.
How
to get
will
those
Pelosi
basic
look about after all
points
this?
through 126 million Americans reached through the Russian IRA in attempts to influence our election.
I hope
These
we
are
learn
the things that need
But
to
let me
come
ask you
out.
a partisan question. Will Pelosi look good after this in her attempt to sort of slow this push to impeachment down? Will she look like she was the wise one?
I think it could be net neutral. I think she had to do this. She's not going to declare victory after this and say, OK, let's go ahead with those impeachment hearings now. That's not going to happen. But to satisfy her base and just to do the right thing, she had to do this. And in fairness to the Democrats, it's been really difficult for them to get Mueller. They have a witness who's bordering on uncooperative. He does not want to be there. He's made that clear.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.